Good day, students, and welcome to the first lesson for Practical Research 1. In this lesson, we are going to cover the following areas. First, we will answer the question, what is research? And we will do so by providing you with definitions and common concepts regarding research as a process. We will then move on to the differentiation of the different types of research, and we will focus on their unique characteristics, their strengths, and their weaknesses as well. Finally, we will also give you a general idea as to the research process, thus answering the question, how is research conducted? So from this lesson, we aim to achieve the following objectives. First is to define research as a process. Second, the ability to explain the importance of research. And finally, to be able to discuss the characteristics and process of research. So to begin with the first objective, let's try to dig into the concept of research as a process. Hampshire College states that research is a process of systematic inquiry that entails the collection, documentation, analysis, and interpretation of data or data. And this is usually done in accordance with the standards and methods set by the different fields or the different institutions that researchers like yourselves must observe. Now, Western Sydney University in 2020 had a different take on research. Research is now the creation of new knowledge or the use of existing knowledge in order to create or discover new concepts, methods, and perceptions. So at the end of the day, how are these two concepts interrelated? Well, to create new knowledge or to be able to use existing knowledge in order to create or discover new concepts, this takes a certain process. This does not happen overnight, and this does not happen instantaneously. Usually, this follows a series of steps. And it usually begins with asking questions or an inquiry. We collect the answers to those questions. We document those answers. We analyze the answers, and then we interpret the answers based on the data that we have collected. And from that analysis and from that interpretation, we are now able to grasp new concepts, new perceptions, which then bring life into more and more research opportunities. And this, I believe, is what it boils down to. In simplest terms, research is simply the process of asking questions, collecting answers to those questions, and interpreting the answers to those questions for the purpose of creating or enhancing new knowledge. So to specify, research is such a broad term, and there are different types of research. There are actually two general types. These are the general types that we commonly apply and observe in the academe, in schools. The first one is quantitative research, and Babi, as cited in USC Libraries in 2020, understands quantitative research as more of an objective measurement, which involves the use of statistical, numerical, or mathematical analysis of data. Simply put, the data that is usually collected from quantitative research is measurable, statistical, numerical, or mathematical. And we are able to collect that data with the use of polls, surveys, questionnaires, or even the manipulation of existing data. Data coming from other researches, which we use and manipulate in order to glean or acquire new concepts or new perceptions. The second type of research is the qualitative research. And this is like the polar opposite of quantitative research, because instead of collecting objective measurements, we now focus on subjective qualities. And these subjective qualities are not measurable, they're not numerical, and they're not statistically inclined. Instead, we are focusing on experiences. We are looking into stories of different people and the narrations of the participants of the research. We are not looking at numbers. We are looking at stories waiting to be told. So the data that you usually collect from qualitative research is acquired through the use of interviews, document analysis, and or focused group discussions. So as you can see, there's a stark difference in the type of data that we collect from these two researches. And there is also a very big difference in the manner by which the data is collected. In quantitative research, it's usually numeric in nature or scalar in nature, as opposed to qualitative research, wherein we use instruments which allow our participants not to rate anything or not to scale anything, but to give their opinions, to share their stories, and to be able to narrate what happened. Okay, so these are just some of the differences and some of the unique characteristics that we can find in each of the types of research. So let's dig deeper. Okay, let's try to look at specific examples of researches under each type. So for quantitative research, the first example would be a survey was conducted among teenagers to study the impact of the usage of mobile phones on children. And this sample of the survey includes youth and teenagers of 15 to 30 years of age. Okay, the mobile phones on one hand are educating the children, and on the other hand are spoiling them as well, because it shows some of the contents which the children should not watch. So this research looks into the impact of mobile phones on children. Is it for the positive or for the negative? And they have to identify the impact through the use of a scale or a rating system. Second, the survey was conducted on some of the offices of one city to study the number of hours spent by the employees in the office. For this, data was collected by observing the time when the employee comes to the office and the time when they leave the office over a period of time. So this data is collected by or from a quantitative form, as it includes the time of coming and leaving of employees from the office. So you see, we are looking at a certain period of time, which is numerical in nature. And they used this data to study the effect of the prolonged stay in the office, or simply the duration of the stay in the office and its effects on the employees. So those are just examples of quantitative researches. Now let's move on to qualitative researches and see if we can determine, see if we can identify the differences between each research type. So for qualitative research, a study was conducted to determine the perception of college freshmen regarding the use of technology in learning and their readiness for college. So the statements of these participants were collected through interviews and observations. And this is a study conducted by Grundmeyer in 2012. So as you can see, the data that is being collected in this research is actually just the perception. It is an opinion, it is a mindset, it is a point of view of these participants. And this is not necessarily quantitative in nature, because they might just say that their perception against or for or about the use of technology in learning is that it is helpful. And the term helpful is not numerical in nature. A second example would be another study was conducted looking into the perceptions of college students regarding bullying, as they recount their experiences with bullying in their K-12 years. They were interviewed about these experiences, and their social behavior with other people was also observed. So again, we are looking at experiences here, stories and narrations of the participants regarding their experiences with bullying, which is not numerical or quantitative at all. So from these examples, we can immediately tell that quantitative and qualitative researches are very different from each other. And to give you a simpler look or a tabular presentations of their differences, here's one example. Okay, so for the type of research, let's try to look at their differences in terms of the nature of the research, the data being collected, and the means of collecting data. So for the type of research, quantitative research is focused on statistics, numbers, figures, numerical data. And that is precisely the type of data that you wish to collect, measurable data, ones that you can statistically and mathematically compute. And we do that by giving the respondents surveys, polls, or questionnaires that they have to check or rate and answer in the form of measurable data. Usually, it's a Likert scale, on a scale of 1 to 5 or on a scale of 1 to 10. However, for qualitative research, it is totally different. The nature of the research is that it is focused not on statistics, not on numbers, not on figures, but on experiences, stories, narrations, the recounting of these narrations, of these experiences, and even the analysis of certain documents, literary documents, which are not quantitative, but they are observable, but on the other side, non-measurable. Okay, so they can be observed, the behavior can be observed, their narrations can be observed, their stories can be told, but can never be measured, because we are looking at behavioral, experiential, or sometimes even literary data. How do we collect that data? We collect that by interviewing the participants, observing their behavior, or through document analysis. We look at literary texts, probably by great authors, and we try to compare and contrast the experiences of these authors as reflected in the literary texts. Now, let's go to their strengths and weaknesses, or where do they shine? Okay, for quantitative research, some of the strengths of quantitative research is that first is many people would look at the credibility of data in quantitative research because the numbers speak for themselves, apparently. There's also the diversity of population composition, because most of the time we do random sampling. We choose participants or respondents at random, therefore adding to the diversity of the sample. There's also less time being given or allotted for data analysis. Why? Because at this age, we already have programs or software that can compute mathematical and statistical data in a snap. And this has done wonders for the field of quantitative research. Fourth, research results are independent of the researcher, which is one strength of quantitative research. If you remove the researcher from the picture, then the data can exist by itself. The numbers can speak for themselves, regardless of the presence of the researcher. Why? Because the data is already available. There is no need to interpret the data based on the point of view of the researcher, because we have statistics and we have mathematical computations to do that for us. Next, results are also considered to be precise in quantitative data because, again, we trust the numbers, we trust the statistics. And this type of research is useful in studying large groups of people. If you want to do a survey for a particular city, a particular demographic, then quantitative research is for you. But on the other hand, qualitative research also has its strengths. The first one is the adaptability to different contexts. What does this mean? When you say adaptability to the different contexts, we mean that the type of research, the qualitative type of research, is able to connect with different groups of people and be less discriminating of their background. Most qualitative research is aimed at determining the experiences of a group of people, and therefore we are able to adjust the nature, the topic of the research based on the participants that we want to study or the phenomenon that we wish to focus on. And that contributes to the adaptability of qualitative research to the different contexts. Second is subjectivity. Sometimes when you're dealing with a lot of people, we miss out on key experiences which certain individuals from that sample have gone through. And because we miss out on these experiences, which later proved to be pivotal, this discrimination is or has a great effect on the quality of the data, which can happen with quantitative research. But in qualitative research, since we are focusing on experiences, then this level of subjectivity is able to extract specific experiences, specific crucial experiences, which may prove to be important in the interpretation of the data. Third, qualitative research also has a more creative approach to it because, again, it is more adaptable. The process of conducting a qualitative research is also a little bit more flexible and more humanistic in nature than quantitative research. Because in quantitative research, everything is rigid. There has to be a process. There is a specific mathematical computation if you want to arrive to a certain or a specific type of data. But in qualitative research, you are open to the possibility of probably changing the approach, changing the method, changing the questions, or even asking follow-up questions which are not found in the original questionnaire. So that in itself gives you an idea as to how creative and how flexible the approach of qualitative research is. So now that we have discussed the strengths, let's talk about the weaknesses. In what areas do quantitative and qualitative researches become weak? Okay. So first of all, for quantitative research, the scope is too general and it may not consider individual experiences. As I mentioned a while ago, okay, we're looking at a very large group of people, and because we are dealing with a large group of people, then the individual experiences are not highlighted. Second, quantitative research may also miss out on certain phenomena due to the focus on theories. So, because we have theories which we already established at the beginning of the research, and these theories will now serve as the basis of the quantitative research, then we may ignore or overlook certain emerging phenomena which may be extracted from the participants because of the use of theories or because we are theory-centric. Okay, so next, the results, while credible, may be too abstract or general and discounts the minority. Again, this points to reason or weakness number one. Because the scope is too general, then the minority might be discounted because we're dealing with statistics here. And in most cases, the majority will always win. So for qualitative research, some of its weaknesses are, number one, it is very time consuming and is labor intensive because the interpretation of data is not using mathematical or statistical computations. Instead, the researcher has to interpret those experiences, and the researcher has to comb through all those stories in order to come up with a solid interpretation. Second, it is also difficult to prove causality in this type of research. Okay, we cannot establish that this experience led to this event, because all we can do is try to probe and to try and attempt a connection between two events. Unlike quantitative research, wherein we can say that if the result falls under a certain statistical range, then we can say that yes, there is a significant relationship, or yes, there is a significant effect, inversely or directly. We cannot do that with qualitative research. Third, patterns of behavior or the responses of the participants may be difficult to detect. Some participants are stingy when it comes to their statements, and even with all the probing questions and the follow-up questions, they might give you very little or too few for you to proceed. Lastly, qualitative research may also be considered to be less credible to educational institutions or to big establishments, because most of them, especially businesses, they require hard facts, numbers, figures, statistics, and to present to them narrations and experiences and the interpretations of these experiences might not fall under credible data. Okay, so we have achieved objective number 2. We have gone through the different types of research, and we have differentiated the types. And by differentiating, we focused on their characteristics, the strengths, and the weaknesses. Now, moving on to the final objective, which is to discuss the general process of research. So, the process of research is usually quite long, and it begins by or with the identification of the field or the area where you want to look for a research problem. This is usually where it begins. I want to create a research in the field of education, or in the field of politics, or I'd like to make a biological research. I'd like to make a research in the field of physics. This is usually step number 1. After you have identified the field where you wish to conduct your research, you're now going to look for or identify the research problem. You ask that important question: what do I want to conduct research on? So you look around. You look at certain events, certain phenomena, and that is where the research problem usually comes from. After you have identified that research problem, you are now going to establish the research background. So this is the part where you read. You look at the history of the phenomenon. How did it come about? How did it start? Where did it start? And how are other places in the world and other places in the country experiencing this particular phenomenon or this particular problem? By that, you gather relevant literature. Okay, so you read in order for you to enrich your understanding about the problem and for you to enrich the understanding of your readers regarding the problem. Now, after the relevant literature have been collected and established, we now identify the appropriate research approach and methodology. We look at whether we want it to be quantitative or whether we want it to be qualitative. That's totally up to you as the researcher. And once you have done so, once you have identified which approach you want to use, then that will determine the manner of data collection. If it's quantitative research that you want to do, then data collection should be done quantitatively through the use of polls, surveys, or questionnaires. But if it's a qualitative research that you want to conduct, then most likely the manner of data collection is going to be through interviews, observations, or focused group discussions, or even document analysis. Once that data has been collected, you now proceed to data analysis. And here, you are going to look at the data based on your research approach. If it's quantitative, then the data analysis is going to be done quantitatively through the use of statistical and mathematical computations. But if it is a qualitative research, like what you are about to do for this semester, then we analyze data qualitatively. We look at experiences, we look at emergent themes, we look for common experiences among the participants and the differences, the unique experiences of the participants, and try to explain why they have these similar experiences and why they have these unique experiences. And that is basically the meat, the overview of data analysis from a qualitative point of view. Next, you are now going to present your results. After analyzing the data and coming up with an interpretation, you are now going to present those results in your analysis of the data, which will then lead you to the formulation of the research conclusions and recommendations. And once that's done, okay, once all the nitty-gritty, once all of the chapters have been turned in, now it is time for you to publish your study, be it in the form of an academic submission, like what you're about to do for Practical Research 1, or even the publication in an institutional journal, or for some people, an international journal at that. So, I believe that ends our lesson for today. All objectives have been achieved. I will see you in the next lesson, wherein we are going to talk about qualitative research. We are now going to zoom in on qualitative research, as is the approach that we are going to take for this particular semester. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that this lesson has been very informative and meaningful to you guys. I will see you in the next lesson. This has been Sir Dardar. Class dismissed.